Welcome to another installment of Friday Q&A. I hope you've all had an awesome week. To everybody who submitted a question for this week's video, big thumbs up. I'm looking forward to getting to as many of them as I can. If you would like to ask me a question and have me answer it on next week's video, simply put it in the comment section somewhere down there. If you like what I'm doing on the channel, you can check the video description and support the channel in a variety of different ways. Let's go. I did a Superstrat comparison video recently featuring some of my favorite Superstrats, and some people wanted to know, out of those, what is my personal favorite? From memory, I had the green guitar my dad made. There was the Schroeder Marksman, an Ibanez RG550, and I think I had the Wolfgang, my PV Wolfgang Special in there. For me, the one that both satisfies me tonally and kind of from just a sentimental perspective is the green guitar in there. That is one that my dad had set up with a Roland GK pickup. My dad still has a Roland VG8, got one when it came out, and some of my earliest memories of guitar are watching him play wild synth noises on that green guitar when I started playing guitar in my teens. I kind of said, hey, can I maybe borrow that guitar and put some pickups in it? And I got some cheap DiMazzios. I think I paid $50 for the pair of those pickups and put them in there, and have been making noise on it ever since. It's pretty unique because it actually has a pearl nut on there. Haven't really seen that on any other guitars, but all of those guitars I really enjoy. They are awesome grease machines. Go watch the video if you haven't already. If you can't get your hands on a Fractal FC controller, what would I recommend as a MIDI controller to use with the Axe effects? A few options here. People seem to love the RJM controllers at the higher end of the spectrum. They seem to do everything. They're super customizable. One of my students has one, and it's a ridiculous machine. Towards the cheaper end, you've got stuff like the AirStep, which I've featured on the channel before, as well as the Morningstar controllers. There's also Pirate MIDI coming out of Australia, and I wouldn't mind checking out some of their stuff at some point because their controllers look great, kind of like the Morningstar stuff, and they seem like they're really well priced. And obviously Aussie gear, I'm going to be all about. If you've been out of the gigging game for a little while and you want to put together a light and compact yet powerful rig, is an all-digital solution really something that's going to work? Well, I use it and it definitely works for me. However, one thing about being a guitar player, what works for one person isn't necessarily going to work for another person. I'm fairly confident most people could go out and gig with a Boss Katana these days, especially seeing as a lot of venues have kind of noise restrictions. It's not the 70s anymore. You don't have to walk into places with like 6 Marshalls and have them on 11. So that would work. Something like a Fractal or a Helix or whatever digital modeler you like with some FR speakers is going to work really well. Using in-ears like I do live works great. I mean, for a long time, I was using an Axe FX and just using whatever monitors were in-house and just kind of dealing with it. And in-ears is a really nice compact way to get around that. It just depends on whether you like the sound of a mic'd up cab coming through an FR speaker. So some people choose to use something like, say, a Seymour Duncan Power Stage and a guitar cabinet. I've got a Matrix power amp for doing that. Some people use their Fractal or Helix in 4-cable method with a real amplifier, and there are so many great powerful little tube combos out there as well. So what I would recommend is sniff around my channel a little bit because I have explored a lot of those options. My experience with EMGs, I've got a Strat, a black Strat with EMGs, going for that Gilmore Pulse kind of thing. That's normally what I think of when I think of EMGs, funnily enough, even though I think most people would associate them with crushing metal tones. I did a video along the lines of like EMG pickups suck, right? Where I just went through some sounds on that particular Strat, and I think it sounds really, really good. I think the difference that you have to factor in is that the frequency response is a lot wider, and they don't necessarily have the same resonant peaks that you get on, say, vintage single coils. So you just have to kind of EQ your amp appropriately, or use, an EQ pedal in there if you want some of those more vintage-inspired tones. Or don't go for the vintage-inspired tones and just lean into what they're doing. Which 2 Synergy modules would I recommend for clean and filth? The 3 Synergy modules that I use the most are the TDLX. That's a really great clean and kind of mid-gain module on there. The 800 is great for crunch tones, and the Uberschall, which in my opinion is the best Synergy module. Granted, I haven't tried the SLO, and a lot of people love the SLO, but if you want to clean cleans and ultra filth, probably the TDLX or the B-Man. They're fantastic modules with the Uber. If you're more a Marshall kind of person, the 800 module is really good, or you might want to try out the Fractal Deliverance. The 2CP is pretty amazing as well, and two 2CPs in a single rig would be pretty killer in my opinion. One for the pristine boogie cleans and another for the crushing crunchy tones. Cutting my hair into a mullet for 100,000 subs. I don't think I would go that far. I wouldn't go like, full Mel Gibson Lethal Weapon. But, I would go Bruce Dickinson mid-80s bangs. That would be more my kind of vibe. There's some super dodgy photos of me from primary school where I had long hair. Basically, I had a mullet, but I had bangs and, had the Bruce Dickinson mini-me thing. In fact, if you're an Aussie, and especially from WA, remember there was an ad which was, there was some kid on there going 13, 13, 32. It was like an Ultra Tune ad or something like that. I wasn't that kid, but I looked exactly like that kid with the mullet. We were talking about digital solutions before. If you're running an FM9, what would I recommend for speakers? Some people have mentioned the headrush stuff. They're not really super flat. There's some threads out there on the internet talking about how to correct that headrush curve. I've got a few students who use the headrush stuff and they seem to like it. It seems to be totally fine. I think if you can stretch it though and go for something like an Atomic CLR or the Red Sound speakers, I'm using the Red Sound MF10s at the moment. They are fantastic sounding speakers. They feel really good. They've kind of got a guitar amp like thud to them. And they've got a little bit of roll off in the high end. So it's not that like super shrill, plasticky sound, really, really loud. They're quite warm sounding and quite punchy. So if you can get your hands on some of those, they would be my current recommendation. I really, really like them. The Red Sound ones, they have a couple of different options like 8 inches and 12 inches as well. Do I keep up with space science? I do. I absolutely love space. I've been fascinated with it since I was pretty much a toddler. The idea of looking up at the sky and looking up at other worlds is an endless source of fascination for me. So the square kilometer array that is being built about 4 or 5 hours north of Perth, it's near a town called Geraldton. We've played in Gero many, many a time and pretty much always had a great time there. So it's pretty exciting for Australian science, I think, having the square kilometer array. Australia launched their own satellite recently. Some friends of mine working out of Curtin University were involved in that project. That was a big deal. And, it's just so cool for me as somebody, again, who grew up being fascinated by space. And in Australia, as soon as you get out of the big cities, there's not really a lot of light pollution. So you see a lot of the sky. And one of the most amazing experiences I've ever had on stage, we were playing a gig at a roadhouse about 7-8 hours from Perth. I was standing on stage, everybody's watching the band, and I saw this incredible fireball in the sky. And I can still see it so vividly in my mind. And I looked around and Ryan's singing and sweating with his eyes closed and Cam's playing drums, staring at something else, and the crowd's looking up at the band. I don't think anybody else there saw it. And I was trying to gesture to people there's this amazing fireball in the sky. There's a meteorite. It's crazy. And yeah, that's something that will kind of stick with me. So yeah, and I saw the thing, there was a tiny little nuclear fusion breakthrough, which is pretty exciting recently. I read up on the kind of science news pretty much every day, and there's a few really great science-based channels on YouTube that I like. My absolute favorite is Anton Petrov's channel. If you don't subscribe to Anton's channel, go and do it. Anton is a wonderful person, a true legend. Have I checked out any of the Kazleader effects pedals? I hope I'm saying that. I haven't. I looked them up on Reverb. It looks like they're coming out of Budapest in Hungary, which is pretty cool. I'm not aware of any other Hungarian pedal companies. Doesn't look like any of their pedals ship to Australia, but if you got a recommendation, maybe I'll go on eBay and pick something up. It looks like they're making some pretty cool pedals. This one comes from friends of the channel, Neil and Kale McLeish. Shout out to you guys. I hope you're doing very, very well. Neil wants to know about how we go about getting support slots. We've been really fortunate to get some awesome international supports over the years. It's a mixture between finding out who the promoter is for a particular gig, emailing them, hoping that they email you back, and then saying, hey, how do we submit to be the support band for this? One, are you taking local supports? Two, how do we do it? And then sending over an electronic press kit. And there's been a few others where we've actually been approached where, we've done some supports for a particular promoter and they'll say, hey, we're bringing over whichever band it is. We think you would be a great match. Are you available? And we've got a support with Wigwam coming up in February next year. That will be a super fun one, and hopefully some other ones in the pipeline as well. Really excited about that. It's super cool that international bands are able to come back and play here now. One last one for today, Sonic the Hedgehog and 80s metal. Is it a perfect mix? I think it's pretty good, even though I kind of associate Sonic with my childhood, which was in the 90s. But when I think of metal and video games, I really think of games like F-Zero. Pretty sure I love the band Racer X because of the video game F-Zero X. When you listen to that soundtrack, it's just all awesome, pumped up, shreddy stuff. And stuff like Double Dragon really reminds me of metal. And of course, Doom. And you know, those Doom metal soundtracks that came out in the early days of YouTube where people were like, oh, what if you just took the Doom soundtrack but played it with distortion? It's pretty awesome. And even like the newer stuff, like the Doom games that have been released in the last decade or something like that, have some absolute chonktastic riffs. Thanks so much for tuning in. As always, if you've got questions for next week, put them in the comments section below. I'm playing at the Henley Brook in the Swan Valley. If you're in Perth, every Friday for the next couple of months. We are playing at the Cornerstone up in Butler, doing a bunch of our own stuff and some of our favorite rock and metal covers this Friday. Then I'm playing with Coverdale on Saturday night, doing some Whitesnake covers, and Ragdoll are back up at Barrow Island next week. And then it's Christmas, so a pretty hectic end to the year. I hope you all have a great weekend, and I'll see you next time.